Good evening. Welcome to Nottingham City Council House. This is the first time anybody's used the ballroom at the Council House since February for reasons that will be obvious to you. So we're really pleased tonight to be launching Kanneh-Masons' book, House of Music, Raising the Kanneh-Masons, here live from Nottingham City Council. I want to thank three people particularly. Jackie Green, who's the organiser at the Council House, John Dexter, Director of Education, and David Mellon, Leader of the Council, for allowing to use this beautiful ballroom. We'll talk later about the importance of the family within our city. This is Cadi Kanneh-Mason, Cadiatu, and everybody calls her Cadi. I'll be interviewing Cadi for about 20 minutes, and then the whole family will be playing. And I'll run through the programme again in a second. But I also want to thank Nottingham City of Literature for supporting and promoting this event. One World Publications, particularly Kate Bland, who's published House of Music. And I should also say on the commercial side, copies of the book are available from Five Leaves Bookshop, but also all the other bookshops in Nottinghamshire, of course. But mostly I want to thank the Cadi-Mason family, Cadi and the Kanneh-Mason family. Cadiatu, Stuart, who's here tonight, Hisata, Braemar, Shaku, Konya, Janeba, Aminatu, and Mariatu. We'll be hearing from all of the musicians later. So the format of tonight is that Cadi and I will be in conversation for about 20 minutes. There'll be 10 minutes of music, 10 minutes of questions, which are largely harvested from customers at the bookshop, 10 minutes more of music, and then Cadi will end the evening. Just before we turn to the book, though, a number of people will have heard some of the family playing chamber music on Radio 3 on Sunday. But also I want to ask about what Simon Rattle said about the future of music, the future of art, because that seems such an important statement to make. And there you were, right at the heart of this. How did you respond when he said what he did?
I think the future of music is even more an issue now than it was before the pandemic. Before COVID-19 hit, I think very much we were worried that the direction that things were going within music education, and there is such a state of budget cuts, and that I think is going to be even more of an issue now. And the reason I talk about music education is I think that's where it begins. If we want young people to grow up and become part of the music industry, it has to start at the schools. But of course, there's got to be funding within the music industry when they're ready to join as well. So yes, I think it's a crisis that everyone needs to be very aware of.
Thank you. I mean, we'll talk later about the support that you've had in Nottingham, and particularly Walter Hall's School and Trinity School. But let's move to the book. It's your story, it's their story, but it's also very much a Nottingham story. Tell us a bit about the book in your own words, and perhaps you could read a little from it.
Well, it's a book that the reason I wrote the book was because every time I went to a concert where my children were playing, people would come up to me afterwards and say, well, we need to know the story of this. How did it all happen? How did they start playing? Where did it begin? And they kept saying, well, where's the book? And then the children started asking me, well, why don't you write it? So I thought, okay, I'll write it. And the way I approached it was I had a whole lot of questions that people had been asking me over the years. And I think I just set out to answer them. And the way I did that was I thought, okay, if I'm going to tell the story of the family, then I need to start at the beginning. And the beginning is not when they were small, it was when I was small and when my husband was small. And it's the story of both our extended families, where we come from, what it means to us, where the encouragement for the music came. And I think it's a much bigger story than just me and Stuart. It's our families and our cultures, where we come from, and that's how I wrote the book.
Do you want to give us a flavour of it at the moment?
about
Do you want to read a little?
Oh, yes, yeah. So I thought the first reading I would do would be from when all the children were small, and just to give a sense of what it was like when I had a house full of very young children and what it meant to try and manage that household. Because I think the story of the children becoming musicians is also a story of the children in a very big family and a very noisy family, and what that meant to us as parents as well. So in the midst of having a house full of very young children, there is a constant battle for structure. The only way I could manage the wonderful chaos of several strong personalities was to balance a sense of humour. They were also funny and so interesting, with a determined attention to routine. The morning preschool order was planned to survive the tyranny of the rogue nappy change, the random tantrum, or an insistent desire from one or more of the children to wear inappropriate clothes. While I dealt with spilt milk or an incomplete PE kit, I would be laughing over Isata getting a word subtly wrong, or Brymer furrowing his brows over a vexed question about what he would do if he couldn't find his football in the future. I would pluck Sheku down from his climb up the front of the bookcase and halt the journey of baby Aminata being pushed helter-skelter by Konya and Jennifer between rooms in their doll's pram. I would often reach the front gate, procession complete, to find that Sheku had sneaked several toy cars up his school jumper, or Konya had her shoes on the wrong feet. The baby was hungry again, and Isata had forgotten her book, and I would stop for a moment, defeated. So I think lots of parents will recognise that.
Well, in fact, one of the questions, which I think you've just answered by Sarah Dale, one of the questions I harvested, is she said, "How the heck do you do it all?" Those weren't her actual words, but you can imagine what her actual words were. But she said, it was obviously an extraordinary feat of leadership, which is an interesting phrase.
And I think a very important phrase, actually, because I think the role of parents is to be that point where you say, okay, these are the boundaries, and then beneath those boundaries, the children can have their own misrule, but you are definitely leading.
You set the boundaries.
We set the boundaries, I think, yes, very much so.
There'll be a family discussion about that. But you said in your introduction that it doesn't start when they were small, it starts when you were small. And one of the really interesting things for me reading the book is about your mother. This, in fact, the relationship between your mother and the father and the bravery of your mother. Well, you tell the story.
Yes, my mother is a wonderfully determined woman. She is incredibly courageous, great sense of humour. She really doesn't care what anyone thinks. And she met my father as a student. He came from Sierra Leone, was a student in Birmingham. They met. She was a 19-year-old girl from Wales, and he was about 10 years older than her from Sierra Leone. They fell in love. And she didn't hesitate to, when she was 22, she followed him to Sierra Leone on a ship and married him. And I think it was an incredibly brave thing for her to do. And it's a story of love. But I think it's also a story of great character. And I look up to my mother a lot. She's helped me a lot, I think, and given me a great example to live by.
So it wasn't just going to Freetown or one of the cities in Sierra Leone as we might know them now. Of course, it was some time ago, and it was up country as well, which was the cultural difference between the valleys and up country Sierra Leone was quite immense.
Yes, it was several days on a boat to start with, and then she arrived in Freetown, got married in Freetown, and then there was in those days there was a train in Sierra Leone, and they went by train up country to the village and started their life there. So everything was completely different from her Welsh Baptist upbringing, completely different world.
But one of the difficult things in reading the book is that there's quite a sense of loss in the book. Skipping on ahead, you lost your father, you lost your country, you lost your language, and came back to Britain. And it's felt that there's this, I'm not sure ghost is the wrong word, but this immense sense of your father being missing, but also your country being missing, and also that turning you into an immigrant into this country, a displaced person in this country.
Yes, because I was born in Sierra Leone with my 4 brothers and sisters. Then my father died when I was 4, and my mother brought us back to Britain. But of course, for us, it was coming to a place which was completely different. And of course, my husband and I grew up in the 1970s and 1980s. And 1970s Britain was a very difficult place, I think, for immigrant children. And suddenly I was in a place where I had an identity which I'd never had before. And I felt I had to survive, I think, outdoors in a way I'd never had to before. So it was a shock and a trauma. And as you say, there was the loss of my father, the loss of all my family who I'd left behind. So I think that's a trauma and a time that is probably very much part of me.
Mm. You talk very movingly about being a mixed-race child in Britain in the 1970s. And I would encourage people to read that section. If you don't want to read the whole book, go into a bookshop, read that section, because it's a very clear description of it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. And one of the questions I got asked was, this is by Diane Bell, who's a local academic. She asked whether you felt that as a black family in Britain, you had to be twice as good as white families in Britain to get by.
And I think that's actually a very important point, and I think that's something that my husband felt as well, and something that he was taught as a child, that if you're in that situation where things are a lot harder, where you feel as though you're constantly in opposition, then the only way to survive is to be twice as good as everybody around you, to work twice as hard. And I think that's something we were definitely brought up with, and probably something we passed on to the children. And I think it's very true for black families and immigrant families that you do have to swim a lot harder to go against the tide. And that's a strength, actually.
Yes.
And a good thing in the end.
In the end. I want to ask a little bit about music, clearly. But you had a musical background, Stuart had a musical background, quite a committed musical background in both cases.
Yes, for Stuart's family, his parents were a force to be reckoned with. They really believed that Stuart and his sister Rhonda should learn music and practice hard and take it seriously. And Stuart's mother is an amazing woman, again, another very strong woman. And they bought Stuart and Rhonda a piano. They were in a terraced house, and she didn't care if the neighbours complained. She said, don't listen to them. You're going to carry on practicing no matter what. When she went to work, she would put a clock on top of the piano and say to Stuart, you have to watch that clock for half an hour, and you do not stop practicing until that half an hour is finished. And he did it. So they were very committed. And Stuart's father would drive him to his cello lessons and his piano lessons. And they were both incredibly dedicated. And I think it has to come, from the parents and that support network.
Moving to the children, although children is with one being 25 now?
24.
24 now. I'm not sure, well, you're always children, I suppose, but when they were children at Walter Halls and Trinity, they had a very committed, a school that was committed to them and a school that supported them. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
We were incredibly lucky with the schools they went to in Nottingham. Walter Halls at that time had Peter Strauss, who was an incredible head teacher, and it was a school that believed in music. and nurtured the children. And they would walk into assembly and there'd be something like Bach being played or Mozart. They encouraged all the children in the school to play musical instruments, and if they played, they were celebrated. And the children felt very much that what they did at home with the music was reflected in the school, and they could play in the school and they were celebrated for that. And it was the same at Trinity School. So there was never that sense that, especially if you were a young black boy playing a violin or a cello, you were never stigmatized. It was something that was very much part of you. You could go and play football, you could go and play sport, and then you could go and play your cello and violin. And the schools supported that. And I think we were incredibly lucky as a family to have that. And I think Nottingham itself supported it as well. So we always felt very warm and very welcome and very celebrated.
And these were local comps. These weren't elite schools, or so-called elite schools.
Exactly.
These were ordinary, everyday comprehensives doing their job.
City-state schools, exactly. Yeah. And they were fantastic.
Yeah. I want to... Gosh, time goes so quickly. One of the aspects of loss was you've had to give up quite a lot yourself in order to provide that leadership, including at times your health, that it's been very intense, and there's also periods of boredom. You talk about sitting, waiting in an empty canteen while the auditions are taking place elsewhere. I can't imagine you'd ever want to do anything other than that, though.
No, exactly. And the sacrifice, of course, wasn't just mine. I think both of us, Stuart as well, had a sacrifice as well, because, of course, he had to work so hard to support the family. My sacrifice was giving up my career, which I loved, in order to give them the time and the energy that they needed. But as you say, I don't regret any of it. And I think all parents, all mothers, have to sacrifice a lot to bring up their children. I think a lot of people will recognise what that's like, that loss of identity when you become a mother. One minute I'm a lecturer with a personality and a brain, and the next minute I'm kind of scrubbing the kitchen floor and changing nappies. So, of course, it can be very difficult, but, of course, incredibly rewarding as well, and I wouldn't change a minute of it.
You've also given up quite a lot of money, because these things don't come cheap, and you talked about, on page 193, you talked about staying in a budget hotel overnight, packed in, sharing a double bed with one of the children, because you couldn't afford a peak time train the next morning. So it's, I mean, you've reaped the family's reaped the reward, but it has seemed to be at times pretty massive struggle to bring up 7 musicians.
Yeah. And very risky, very scary at times. Some times were very dark when I was in the house doing the laundry, not being able to afford the heating, and not being able to afford holidays or cars that worked, and the ceiling leaking and things like that. But I think for the children themselves, I think they've benefited from not having everything they wanted straight away, not having the Xboxes and all the flash things that some of their friends might have. And I'm hoping it's something that they're grateful for, because what they had instead was a huge amount of camaraderie. They had things that I thought were actually more meaningful. And they had our time as well, which is incredibly valuable.
Shall we hear from them? We'll seamlessly move towards the music by moving everything round. One of you is going to say what you're going to play, and perhaps one of you could introduce everybody individually so that the people who are viewing know who you are.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here in the Council House in support of our mum's book. We're very proud of her. We'd like to play for you Schubert's Ave Maria.
Hello, I think Ross asked us to introduce ourselves individually, so maybe we'll do that now, and then I will play my arrangement of Bob Marley's No Woman, No Cry.
Hello, so I'm Isita and I'm the oldest, and I'm 24. My age was kindly revealed recently. So.
Hello, my name is Brimer. I'm the second eldest. I'm 22. I think we're all in order of age, actually.
Almost. Oh, yeah,
almost. If we swap, yeah.
My name is Sheku, and I'm 21 years old.
My name is Konya, and I'm 20. My name is Jennifer, and I'm 18.
My name is Alanata, and I'm 14. 15 tomorrow. My name is Mariette, and I'm 11, the youngest.
Thank you very much. Older people in the audience outside here are probably thinking, when did I first hear that song? And it was many, many years before Sheku was born, that's for sure. Sheku, this is a question from Francis Timon. Does he feel, and I think your mother's going to have to answer for you here, unless you want to come up, an enormous burden being the first young black man in the position that he is. Does he feel that he is a role model to a certain extent, or is it so annoying to feel that you have to be that person?
Do you want me to answer that, Sheku, or do you want to answer?
I think you know, yeah.
I think Sheku takes his position as a role model very seriously because since he started becoming known as a cellist, he's been at concerts where young children come up to him and say, the reason I started playing is because of you, or because I heard you play, which is an incredible thing to hear. And I think that it's not just, of course, young black children, it's all young children. The family want to encourage to take up music and to play. And I think it's not so much a burden, but a responsibility, and a very serious responsibility, and in lots of ways a great joy, I think, when you have moments like that.
Yes. And of course there is one other member of the family who aims to be an even better cellist than Sheku.
Yes. Yes, Mariatu assumes that she will be, and I'm sure she will.
One of the questions that a number of people have asked is about sibling rivalry, in fact. Can't reveal all of your internal family life, but is there sibling rivalry in a...
Do you know, we get asked that question all the time, and the honest answer is there really isn't. And I think it's because, well, number one, they're all different ages. So the older ones see it very much as their job to help the younger ones. And because they help and support each other, and because they play together. So I think if you're playing music with each other, that's not a matter of rivalry, that's cooperation and teamwork. And they're brothers and sisters, so I don't understand rivalry between brothers and sisters, because I grew up in a family with brothers and sisters, and we were just together. So
I think it was Sandeep Mahal asked if the future would involve them playing as a set or pairs or whatever. Is there a kind of vague plan to have individual careers or collective careers or semi-collective careers? Oh,
certainly individual careers, and I think they do play together as a family a lot. They play as a septet, they have played as a quartet, they play as a piano trio, 2 different sets of piano trios actually, duos, and that will carry on, and I think they will come back together and play separately as well. I think it's an ongoing flow of different things.
One of the other questions that, in this case, Panya Banjoko has asked. Panya runs one of the key people in Nottingham Black Archive, and of course they were very excited by this book. But Panya asked how you feel. It's hard for you to blow your own trumpet, although trumpet isn't something that appears in your ensembles, maybe you can. To blow your own trumpet about the importance of the family and this book to Nottingham as a whole. She sees it as very, very important to black people as a whole in Nottingham. But her question is more how much you see it as important to Nottingham as a whole.
Well, I think Nottingham is very important to us because, of course, the children, most of them born here, all of them went to school here. And so their education is here, their friends are here, their sense of identity is here, and they have been very well looked after by Nottingham and feel very much part of that. So I think it's very much a dual relationship. I mean, it's Sheku, for example, always does his album launches in Nottingham. It's very important. We always come back here. They always come back here for concerts. So I hope it's something that, you know, Nottingham is within the children as well.
Yes, and I think that answers Cathy Grindrod's question as well. What would you do if one of your children came home and said, what I really want to do with my life is be a train driver or a brain surgeon, or I just want to go travelling forever? How would you react if one of them said, I've had enough with music?
I don't think any of them will ever say they've had enough with music. What they might say is they don't want to be professional musicians. Yeah. And I think as long as they choose something that they're dedicated to, they want to do, they love, they're passionate about, they're going to work hard at, I would have no problem whatsoever. In fact, Aminata is very keen to be an actor rather than a violinist, and I think that's fantastic. Yeah. So as long as they're doing something that's creative and profound and central to what they want to do, that's all that's required. And the reason we wanted them to grow up with music is because that teaches you that. You don't have to become a musician, but what it teaches you to do is work hard to achieve something, to express yourself. It gives you self-esteem, and you can do anything you want to after that.
Yes. Somebody asked about how would you feel if one of them said, I've had enough of classical music, I want to do country and western. No. But actually, I know within your house you play all sorts of music, yes. But I thought it was quite interesting, classical at one end and country and western at the other. So, is Sheku's next CD going to include 9 to 5?
I don't think it is. But actually, all the children, they're not exclusive about classical music. I think music is music. So they're very happy to incorporate and celebrate all types of music. And those artificial boundaries between this is one type of music that some people play, this is another type, that's exactly what they want to break down. So I'd have no problem in them exploring any type of music.
Yeah. The family has been playing and will play some Jewish music shortly. Whence came the interest in klezmer music and Jewish music? Was that just by chance, or?
Well, of course, they grew up with Fiddler on the Roof as a musical that they loved. But also, klezmer music in particular was because of Vicky Manderson, who was head of music at Trinity School, and she started a klezmer band, which a lot of them were involved with, and they just adored it, and they've loved klezmer ever since.
Yeah, there was a wonderful, I presume it's still findable on Facebook or YouTube, concert in the street, in your own street. Yes. On one of the lockdown days. It was wonderful to see that everybody out in the street playing klezmer music, which is the tradition of klezmer music. The logistics, I mean, there's a lot of 4:30 a.m. trips to London, and then there's the extra seat on a plane for a cello. And it's, again, it requires a degree of leadership, if not management skills, to
yes,
look after that.
Definitely. I think learning music and being a musician requires travel. Well, of course it did before the pandemic, but yes, so going to lessons every Saturday meant you had to travel by train, which meant the issue with the instruments. When Sheku goes on an aeroplane, he has to buy a seat for his cello, which can cause all sorts of problems at check-in, no matter how prepared you are. And yes, it's a constant battle, a constant issue, and exhausting as well.
Have you wished, or Stuart wished that you'd also become professional musicians at some stage?
That's a very interesting question.
Because I know more about Stuart's music background than yours, but was that ever a possibility, or was it simply no, we can't do that?
It was more of a possibility in Stuart's case because he was actually given a place at a music school when he was about 11. But because he didn't really understand what that meant and he came from a family that didn't really understand what it meant, they gave him the choice. And he said, but I don't want to give up football. So he didn't go. But I think now he looks back on that and thinks, I mean, he would have been an incredibly brilliant pianist, actually. So I think that's something which he now loves to see that coming out in his children.
Yes.
And I adored music and I would have loved to have gone further, but never quite had the opportunity or the knowledge or the family background to get that far. So I think both of us were very keen that the children had those opportunities that we didn't quite have.
Yeah. How was Stuart's football career?
He's a brilliant footballer, but that wasn't his career.
What do the children think of your book?
Well, it was the children who encouraged me to write it. And I remember there were days when I was thinking, I've got so much laundry and ironing and everything to do, this is ridiculous. And they were always the ones who told me that I had to sit there and write it. And they were always asking me, well, how far have you got, Mum? And I think they're the ones who pushed me to do it, and they absolutely love it. Thank goodness.
Did they read it as it went along?
No, they read it when I'd finished. I wouldn't let anyone, even Stuart, read it until it was finished. And then they devoured it and read it very quickly, actually.
Yeah. We'll move to a little more music in a second. But I want to ask about Black Lives Matter, because as well as the COVID crisis this summer, there was the rise of Black Lives Matter to be a national, universal concern. And one of the locally most moving, for me, aspects of it was the Friday before the huge Black Lives Matter demonstration on the Forest. You broadcast from your house appropriate music, and you gave a speech as to why Black Lives mattered to you, and all of you went on that demonstration, as did my partner, as did I, and the Bookshop supported that demonstration as much as we could. Do you see that things will change, particularly in Britain. God knows what will happen in America, but particularly in Britain as a result of these demonstrations, this activity.
We hope so. We think there's a real opportunity at the moment to have the discussion and to bring it into the foreground. I think so many more people are now engaging with the issue, and no one can ignore it anymore. And we just hope that this is a chance to push things forward and to hope for change. I was very worried before the George Floyd murder and after it as well, that things were going backwards again, that they were getting worse again, and I think we have reached another crisis. And our only hope actually is that things change, our only hope for everybody. And I hope that our family are a family that's keen on healing division and promoting love. And I think we have to be hopeful for the future.
And one of the exciting things about being in the book trade was to see over the whole book trade, bookshops doing, including bookshops that weren't open, of course, during that time. They were still doing window displays in Woodbridge and just all over Britain. The whole book trade turned to supporting Black Lives Matter. It was an exciting moment to be in the book trade, to see that we could be allies in that way. And one of the black-owned bookshops in Sevenoaks, they just got inundated with requests because so many people said, I'm going to buy books to do with Black history and I'm going to buy them from black-owned bookshops. Looked up who had black-owned bookshops, and this bookshop in Sevenoaks was at the top of the list. They just got inundated. It was fantastic. I wonder if we should move to bring back the musicians. I'm trying to keep a close eye on time because we have an hour altogether. So we will, again, in a discreet, marginal way, slip from the stage and the musicians will come back.
Hello, so they're currently setting up the chairs, but actually I'm going to play a solo on the piano first. So this is Gershwin's first prelude in B-flat major, and then all 7 of us will play some songs from the musical Fiddler on the Roof, which we've arranged for the 7 of us. And now, as I said, all 7 of us will play some songs from the musical Fiddler on the Roof.
Right, we'll do a couple more questions, and then Caddy will read another short piece from the book, and then that's it. Thanks again to Nottingham City Council for hosting this. The people who've done the tech tonight are Flying Shark Media. This performance will appear on the Five Leaves YouTube channel and the Family YouTube channel and various other places. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to it live, but if you want to see it again, there'll be opportunities to. Caddy also very kindly signed another big batch of books tonight before we started. She'd already done a whole pile on Sunday. They were all reserved or gone, but we'll have signed copies in the shop again tomorrow. A couple more questions. This has been a strange evening because there's been an audience. We were allowed a maximum of 15 people in the ballroom tonight for COVID reasons, and given that there's 7 children, 2 parents, 2 technicians, 2 people from the bookshop, I think our audience is 2, which is not what we're all used to. And but for the moment, that's all that we can do. What do you think of the difference between properly live music as opposed to live streamed music and pre-recorded music? I mean,
Well, of course, it's wonderful to have live streamed music and pre-recorded because, of course, so many people can watch that and access it, but nothing replaces proper live concerts. And I think for musicians and for audiences, we are desperate to get back to proper concerts. I think everybody misses that. And there's something incredibly magical about being actually there. The live music is something that cannot happen in a recording. It can't happen from a distance, from a screen. That's a very different experience. So we need to get back to live concerts. We'll pray for the day.
Yeah. Looking back on what you've done with the family and in the family that you came from and the family that you provide leadership for now, is there anything, and this was another question from Sarah Dale, is there anything you would have done differently?
From my family? From how I was brought up, or from how I brought the children up? Would I, if I went back, would I do something
If you went
differently?
back and said, I don't mean the small things, we all have small things, or are there big things that you think, I would have done something differently here?
I think what a lot of mothers lack is self-confidence, is the belief that they're doing the right thing. I went to bed every night, particularly when they're young, and of course I still do it now, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm a terrible mother, everything went wrong today, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have more courage, I should have more energy, I should have more strength. And I think mothers and parents, I think particularly mothers probably, beat themselves up all the time about that. And I would like to go back and enjoy it more, because now I look back at photos and videos of the children and think, wasn't it wonderful? But a lot of the time I was thinking, aren't I terrible? And I think that's what I would change.
But that can also lead to a bit of humour. There's a lovely piece in the book where you're trying to be this super mother, super professional, and the cameras come into, who does world cooking, and you're cooking mass catering. You have to be a mass caterer if you've got a family that size. And the cameras come through, and you've got some spaghetti and pesto sauce from a packet. It was wonderful to read that you can't be brilliant all of the time.
Exactly. There are moments when you are just pretty bog standard. Yeah. And I've definitely opened several cans of beans in the past.
Obviously, it hasn't done them any harm. Would you like to finish the evening by reading a little more from the book? And then that will be it. Thank you to all the people watching tonight, and thank you to the whole family for being here tonight.
Now, I wasn't sure what I was going to end with. I was going to see how the questions went. But then I listened to Sunrise, Sunset from the Fiddler on the Roof. And that piece of music always makes me cry because it brings up the memory of, or the realization of how children grow up, about how everything gets lost very quickly. And at the end of the book, I found myself, at the end of writing the book actually, I found myself just walking around the house as the children start to leave home and thinking about the past and the memories of the past. What was interesting about the pandemic was that a lot of them had left home, but then of course everybody came back. So we had a house full again. Recently, I walked around our untidy rooms. There's never yet been time to get on top of the chaos fundamental to the house. Years of new babies, new toddlers, growing children, and lively personalities has created a jumble of all the things they have made, drawn, achieved, worn, worked on, read, and handed down. We have souvenirs of concerts played, photos taken, shoes and clothes grown out of and waiting to be passed on to a younger one. We have sheet music, old instruments, toys they still want or have forgotten about, board games they still play, art, accessories, hair products, pots of Vaseline, hair grease, and abandoned cosmetics. I trip over old diaries, boxes of music, certificates and concert programs. The windowsills are crammed with football trophies and ornaments the children made in school. Out of picture frames decorated with painted hearts or coloured tissue paper, I can see the primary school faces with front milk teeth lost and the eagerness of a child at Christmas, Easter or Mother's Day.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you very much, Caddy. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to the musicians. That's it. The book is House of Music.
Thank you.
The book is House of Music, published by One World, available in bookshops worldwide, and especially in Nottingham.
Thank you. Thank you.